building that trust by, performing your role, being prepared, going over the mission, going over those crunch points, and acting quickly when you needed to act. Um, that really seemed to form a cohesive crew.
If you could talk about where you saw yourself evolve as a leader, how did you continue to grow in that space from, where you started as a, quiet, more reserved leader, still quite passionate, but where did that show up and how did it show up in the deployed spaces?
Just to give people an idea of the operations at the time, they were, very fast-paced. This is, like, around 2001, 2002, and on. We had to, fly a large part of the mission, because a lot of the experience was in the Air Force Reserve. I was serving out of Joint Base Lewis McChord, and so we would take large contingents of, especially Army personnel from, Joint Base Lewis McChord, usually to the East Coast, maybe to Europe, such as Germany, and then overseas. It might have been the opportunity for me to sort of have a briefing, and then in general, the mission would match the briefing usually. Usually, this is in the KC-135. I would say in the C-17, it was very intense where you were on alert, and then the mission could change and evolve. It might be, incredibly intense where it was at night. You might be landing, with night vision goggles on a runway that wasn't lit, and so there were very intricate details. So changing mission, very intense missions, and the last part was very long missions. So I believe that, I had to really dig deep, and always be willing to, um, have that resilience and more resilience and more endurance than I'd ever had before. Also working with a larger crew, for a longer period of time. Just really I knew that the people around me knew their jobs well, they were motivated, they wanted to serve, and they could execute well, and they were passionate about the mission. So I think just having that stamina and endurance and flying in more challenging conditions, definitely.
When you're stepping into some of those roles, there's this need to build a team very quickly and trust. And, obviously leadership is part of pulling all that together. How did you do that successfully? I mean, aside from, having stamina and really just, I think, being ready, were there any other things that you felt you really tapped into from your strengths that helped you to navigate that cohesion and that trust together pretty quickly?
Right, it seems like one of the easiest way to build trust and have that team is there are really standardized roles that are expected in the crew. And when the crew knows that you know your role inside and out and that you can execute well, that you will, speak the way you need to speak, that you'll fly the way you need to fly, that really quickly helps to build trust. I think also it helps to be able to speak through the mission, to be able to talk about some of those key crunch points and, options that we would have as a crew, and basically work together to make decisions. And also, if that one person had information that the rest of the crew didn't have, such as the need to go around or to stop or to turn the other way, that the entire crew, especially the other pilot, would listen to that information and execute immediately. Um, so building that trust by, performing your role, being prepared, going over the mission, going over those crunch points, and acting quickly when you needed to act. Um, that really seemed to form a cohesive crew.
You'd mentioned a little bit ago that working with Alaska Airlines, the pace is a little different and the mission has changed. I'm curious on how your leadership has evolved when you think about a changing mission, and maybe it's not life or death or national security, but how do you continue to evolve as a leader when the stakes aren't as high?
In the military mission, it was more, it was usually time critical, and it called for often a very assertive type of quiet leadership. So you're still bringing that assertive type of quiet leadership, but you're also bringing customer service to families and passengers who are getting to where they need to go, whether it be a vacation or to visit family or taking a business person where they need to go. So you're having that patience, letting people know that they're welcome, that you're happy to see them on board. You're working with crew members who may not have that sort of military background, and so there are different communication styles. Um, different, they're different people, and so you're really sort of reading who they are and making sure that you can communicate information in a way that is effective for them as a person and their age and experience level. So I think I had to just sort of maybe dial it back a little bit in my presentation, make sure I just gave that great customer service. I would say in the cockpit, it is that same in the flight deck. I'm sorry, you're giving that same crew resource management, that same building that same trust within the person who letting them know that you know your job and that you're ready to execute. So I would say it's probably more insane the same within the flight deck there.
I would almost go so far as to say is the ability to understand when you need to assert more and when maybe a more quiet and customer service oriented leadership style needs to be used. You almost have a superpower of understanding when to employ them. How do you help others who maybe have the other side of the leadership spectrum where they come in I'm a very assertive type leader. How do you help them see the value in your approach that is natural to you?
We have a moment at the end of our flights at Alaska Airlines, where we sort of we sit back and we basically say, "How do we think that went? What could we change?" And so I'm able to sort of give my perspective and maybe how I might have done things, or perhaps sometimes we'll divide duties and the captain will say, Okay, I see here maybe you would be great at doing this duty. Could you take this over?" And so I think that's how I can show that maybe a different style of leadership would be more effective in those certain situations. And we're trained to really listen and just take in the feedback that's coming towards us. And I would say all of the crew members are very good at listening, adjusting, and taking in what's offered to them.
By you kind of sharing the ability to listen, but also, share your perspectives, I think in itself is another great leadership lesson that strong leaders have the ability to listen to others and take in other inputs before making decisions or moving forward. So I think that was a wonderful recollection of how you do that in the civilian world in aviation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this leadership lesson, watch the full episode by hitting the thumbnail here and subscribe now to get the latest episodes of Long Blue Leadership delivered directly to your YouTube feed or wherever you get your podcasts.